Welcome to the Bike Life Podcast by Warm Showers Foundation, where we will be sharing knowledge, experience, tools, and stories of touring cyclists and hosts from around the world. I'm Tahverlee, the woman behind the scenes at Warm Showers Foundation, the leading platform for cyclists looking for hosts and to connect with a passionate international community. Find out more by visiting us at Warmshowers.org. Now, on to the show. Today's guest has been cycle touring since 2014. He is the host of the podcast called the Intrepid Global Citizen Podcast and has authored the book Unhinged in Ethiopia, 2,000 Kilometers of Hell and Heaven on a Bicycle. Welcome, George.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I love having other podcast hosts on the show because we flow well. We both have good equipment. It just seems to create a different level of communication. So I'm really glad to have you here. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to be here with you.
So let's start with a little bit about you. Tell us where you're currently located and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm in Seoul, South Korea, where I've been living for 15 years. I'm teaching at a university here, which I'm really lucky to have this job because it gives me about 4.5 to 5 months of paid vacation per year, which enables me to go on adventures and tour, cycle, and travel and do all the things that I love to do and be the host of a podcast as well. So I'm really fortunate, and Seoul is a great place to visit and to live. If all my friends that come out and visit me here, they all say, "Okay, I can understand why you've been here for 15 years, and it'd be really easy to stay for longer than that." So,
what led you to Seoul?
I wanted a change. I was working as an engineer in Detroit and took the kind of normal route of just graduating from university, finding a job, and found myself like sitting in front of a computer all day long and just fantasizing about getting out there. And, after graduating, I visited Ecuador and was hiking up, active volcanoes and just, stomping through the jungle and having all these adventures. And then I found myself in a cubicle a few weeks later, and I was just like, wow, this isn't the life for me. So I left that job behind and came to Korea and was always interested in education and teaching through some volunteer work. I got involved in Detroit as well, in the inner city. And here I am 15 years later. Time just flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, amazing. And what led you? Let's go down the bike touring rabbit hole. What led you to your first tour in 2014? Like, how did that develop? I mean, if you've had this time off in the summer, I'm assuming you've been cycling anyway, but what led to sort of that first longer tour?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was kind of a spontaneous decision, actually, because I was getting ready for one of my vacations and I booked a ticket to Uzbekistan and wanted to, go to Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan and check out the Pamir Highway, which is one of the most famous places to go on a cycling tour. And I was originally just going to backpack it, but then just kind of spur of the moment, maybe a week or so before I left, I said, hey, why don't I just take my beat up, used bike that was, I think I paid $180 for it. It was a hybrid bike, and just took a backpack with me and just totally unprepared and just said, let's do this for 2 months and see what happens. And I just figured it'd be a great way to get out there and really enjoy the scenery and slow down a bit and enjoy nature and connect with local people more. And it was all of that and more. So.
And how long was that?
Ever since then, I've been hooked since then. So.
Yeah, right, exactly. And how long was that first tour?
That was about 2 months. So I started out in Tashkent and then went down to the border with Tajikistan and cycled up the Pamir Highway through Osh and then back around to Tashkent again in a total of about 2 months. Yeah, and it was a learning experience. I didn't know what I was doing. You ran out of water at one point and just had this like $20 tent that had broken poles and was just, knocking on, and I didn't have warm clothes either. I just figured, oh, it's summer, and summer at 4,300 meters is a bit different from summer in Tashkent. So I was knocking on doors to find a warm place to sleep at night at times, and
Right.
yeah, it was an adventure every day.
Were you
Enjoyed it.
with Warm Showers at that time?
No, I didn't have any idea about warm showers at that time. I think might have found out about warm showers on that tour just from meeting other cyclists there. And then I started using warm showers where I hit a real home run with warm showers in Bangladesh of all places, because I was looking for contacting people just to buy a used bike in Dhaka, in the capital. And I contacted a guy. This was, I think, back in 2016, 2017-ish. It was like, just, hey, do you mind helping me, showing me, where can I get a cheap bike in Dhaka? And he just said, okay, I'll meet up with you when you get here. And he ended up cycling with me for a week and introducing me to his friend. And his friend gave me one of his bikes. His friend had like several bikes, and he just said, hey, what kind of bike do you usually tour on? I said, a hybrid. And he turned his personal bike into a hybrid, changed the tires around for me, and took me in with his family. And it was, that was just incredible. Yeah. Experience.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And it does make such a difference when you start to connect with the community along the way, and people that understand your passion and want to just give you refuge for a little bit because they feel like they become a part of your journey.
Yeah, definitely. And in Bangladesh, especially, there's a big community called BD cyclists. They have several Guinness World Records. They have the longest single file line of cyclists in the world for a certain distance. So they have these like quirky world records because it's such a huge, the most densely populated country in the world. It's just a, fascinating place to be.
Amazing.
Bangladesh as well.
Amazing. I'm just going to bear with me for 1 second.
Sure.
I just wanted to make sure that our settings were good, so those that are watching us on YouTube can make sure that they're seeing you. I'm not sure that they get to see just you. I was trying to take myself out of the video, but I think I'm still going to be in it. So hello, everybody on camera. All right, so George, talk to me a little bit about what happened next. So you did that first tour, and then in 2016, you ventured out again. Like, what has your experience of touring been? Because of course I want to get to Ethiopia. So where did Ethiopia come into that plan?
That's a good question. I've always wanted to visit Ethiopia ever since before I started tour cycling and was just, backpacking. And I'd always been drawn to it, just living in Michigan, especially. There was an Ethiopian restaurant of all places that kind of drew me in. And it was a bit of a place of refuge where I could kind of, experience a different culture and really enjoyed the food, and started researching all about Ethiopia and just realized that it just has so much to offer. It has very little European influence, and it's the most mountainous country in Africa. And then I started reading. I read some books about other tour cyclists traveling, doing the Cairo to Cape Town route, and they all have, didn't have very good things to say about Ethiopia because of the rock throwing children. And ironically, that kind of like gave a light bulb went off in my head and said, wow, I need to try this place. What's the worst that can happen? These internet stories are, just, you don't read much good about Ethiopia, but it just sounds like such a fascinating place culturally and historically. So I figured, okay, let me, I'd been to my first trip was the Pamir Highway. I didn't know what I was doing. And then after that, I was in Oman and Bangladesh, Turkey, Xinjiang, China, and Mongolia, Siberia, Russia before the war. And then I said, okay, let's try a new continent. Let's go to Africa, and Ethiopia is going to be the country for me. And what's the worst that can happen? What doesn't kill me can only make me stronger.
Right.
So I really kind of just struggled with, okay, what am I going to do about these kids that are throwing stones? About, I just hear horror stories about, just people getting stones thrown at them. And one guy got attacked by a bunch of villagers and got beat up for retaliating. And I said, okay, I've been a meditator for 6 or 7 years since then. I was like, okay, let's put my meditation practice to the test and see what happens. So
what year did you plan to go? When was that?
This was 2019, so right before the pandemic.
Okay.
And things were, if you follow Ethiopia and like current events now, right after I came back, the civil war started up again, and it's just unfortunate. So I met a lot of great people there too, a lot of great friends that, within the next year or so, they contacted me and saying that they were essentially war refugees, and they, just heartbreaking stories of people that were really, warm-hearted and just helped me. And
okay, so let's hear the trip from like beginning to end. So you're meditating, preparing. You're like, okay, I'm gonna do this. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. You were interested in Ethiopia, so I feel like you already had a heart connection, like deep in your heart for Ethiopia, even before you had been there, knowing that there was some external influences that had come in to kind of make you feel some trepidation. But you decided to do it. So how long were you going to go? Like, what was the planning for it like?
Yeah, that's a good question. The planning, there wasn't much planning, though. The preparation I did mainly was physically, because my whole plan was, okay, I have to get in the best shape of my life in order to like outcycle these kids that are like running through the mountains and eating protein and omega-3 packed injera that's like a superfood, they've been grown up like in this high altitude environment. And I did like 2 workouts per day. So I'd go on a long run in the morning, and then in the afternoon I'd do like some pretty hard, like high intensity interval training. And my whole theory was, okay, I need to like outrun these kids, and just physically be able to outdo them on a bike, even though they'll be on their feet, which is, sounds kind of crazy, but they can really get moving when they start running. So that was the most preparation I did for it. But and the political situation was really shaky. Like some parts of Ethiopia a few weeks before were closed because of tribal clashes. And so it was really kind of spontaneous decision of which region of the country to visit as well.
Right. And so did you plan to just visit Ethiopia when you went there? Was that your primary focus? And how long were you planning to be there?
Yeah, it was only Ethiopia. I got a round trip from the capital Addis Ababa to Seoul, and that was my focus. It was about 5 weeks long, and I just didn't really have a set plan until I arrived, and just got local advice on the political situation at the time, and ended up cycling north up to the border with Sudan, the Tigray province, which is in the news quite a bit recently for with the civil war. And so, yeah, that was how my trip went, essentially.
So you went up to the north, and what was it like? What was your 5 weeks? And we don't want to give too much away because we really want people to buy the book. So we're going to put the link to the book in the show notes, but give us the high level summary. Was it what you expected it to be?
Yeah, it was everything and more,
Did you get
It
chased by
was.
kids? Did you get chased by kids
I
throwing
got
rocks?
chased by kids every single day, especially, on the way to Lalibela, which is like a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's a rock-hewn church, like made from a single rock. And that road was just like, wow, the worst nightmare I'd ever experienced. Like I had 30 kids chasing me at one point, and and then my rack, like my rear rack, like just collapsed into my tire as these kids were chasing me, and they were trying to push my bike off of this cliff, off these switchback roads. So it's not just, okay, let's go up some switchback roads and at 3,500 meters altitude. It's like, okay, you're going uphill and now there's kids there and they're trying to push you, and you could tumble off that cliff. So this is what I had to deal with. And on that particular stretch of road, I had 30 kids chasing me at one point, and my rack collapsed into my tire. And then it was actually funny. They all stopped and just kind of were surprised and didn't know what to do and looked at each other. And then they tried to help me. They were like, okay, let's help this guy out. So they had like this. They like gave me this quick fix, temporary fix. They all kind of fixed my rack together, and then I kept going on the bike, and then some of them disappeared and got tired, and then some of them kept chasing me along, and it started all over again. So it was just like it's their way of playing, really, in a different way.
That's what I was going
But
to ask. Like in your time there, were you able to maybe get to the heart of why? I mean, the rock throwing seems different than chasing. But did you understand more of like why this particular culture, these children do that with cyclists?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the only reason I could, see was I saw, quite a few adults doing that to children too. Throwing rocks at children when they were getting angry. So I figured, okay, they see adults and their parents throwing rocks at them, so they just figure, okay, it's just a way of playing, or a way of expressing your anger, or
the fact that you were a foreigner, it could be something like that. And are we talking like small rocks, like pebbles that are just like annoyance, or are we talking big rocks where if it like hit you in the eye, you would be injured?
Yeah, we're talking rocks of all sizes. I mean, golf ball size rocks. We're talking tennis ball size rocks here. I've heard stories of, cyclists getting like knocked off their bike and like just having to go to the hospital with pretty serious injuries. But luckily that didn't happen. But yeah, at one point on that road, I just had to say, throw my hands up and hitch a ride and just be like, I need to get off this road.
Right,
it's
right.
terrible. And so that was, I guess, rock bottom. But I was lucky to get out of it like that. But then that same day, it was such a tiring day. I hitched a ride to the town, and I just wanted to go to and just get a room and stare at a wall. Basically, I was so like mentally exhausted and psychologically drained. And so I started go for a walk, look for something to eat, and was just going to go back to the room and relax. And then I hear this voice from below, hey, Farangi, which means like foreigner in Amharic, the local language. And then, but I heard music blasting from below, and then lo and behold, it was this like wedding party. And this guy invited me to a wedding party right there, like right after, a few hours later. And I was just having the best time. He was trying to hook me up with his sister and like, hey, she's single, hey, when you go back to the capital, she'll cook you dinner and you guys should go dancing together. And so it's just like total, like the subtitle says, like hell and heaven every single day there. And that's just a microcosm of life. I felt like it was life experience at an accelerated rate. That's what life is about, right? So,
So if anyone wants to read more about George's experience in Ethiopia, we won't give you any more teasers. Go get the book. It's going to be in the show notes and read more about George's experience. And thank you for sharing that, George. I think it's really fascinating that you selected a location that you knew was going to be a challenge, but something that you were interested in, and you endured, both the hardships and the extreme joy, like all at the same time in 5 weeks. And I
yeah.
look forward to reading your book. I will also use the link, and I love hearing stories, especially about various parts of Africa because they're so different. And I have some experience in Kenya. I've been to Kenya several times, so I would love to learn more about Ethiopia.
Okay. Which part of Kenya have you been to?
In Nairobi, I worked on
Um,
an international project with a city in China and a city in the U.S. and a city in the Africa. It was a trilateral relationship project, and it was really, really amazing to see 3 totally different cultures come together to work on a specific project. It was from the political level to the business level to the community level to the real grassroots level of what nonprofit impact really looks like. So it was really fascinating for me to be able to interact in various levels in the community. It was pretty amazing.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A few months later, I cycled across Kenya too, actually,
Mm.
and up to Lake Turkana in the Turkana province, if you're familiar with that area.
Mm-hmm.
Which was it has its own set of challenges too. But
All very different.
yeah,
It's like
I'm
very,
sure
very
I'm sure you've
different.
heard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
don't know.
for
Did you
sure.
get up to Turkana when you were there?
No, definitely not. I traveled with a lot of
Okay.
different international delegations, so we were pretty restricted on where we were
Oh, I see.
allowed to actually visit. But yeah, it was all very, very eye-opening for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, definitely.
let's switch topics because I know we're running short on time, but I do want to hear about this Intrepid Global Citizen podcast. What an interesting name. I love the name so much. And to have the word intrepid in it immediately invokes a reaction. So tell us about when did it start and why did you start a podcast?
Yeah, sure. This started, with it was basically a pandemic podcast. Was stuck in home here in Korea in my apartment, and just missed the conversations that I'd had on the road, with other cyclists and adventurers, and just missed those connections. So I figured, hey, I can use social media and connect with others and share others' experiences and lessons learned through Zoom, just like we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really been a pleasure to connect with others, like-minded people, and also have them share their experiences with others that might be more hesitant to take the first step to get out there on the bike and go for their adventure.
Is it
So
is it bike touring specific?
it's adventure travel. So we have
Adventure
some
travel. Yeah.
walkers
Yeah.
there. We have mainly tour cyclists. There's one guy that was walking he's been walking for 30 years, and he's trying to go from the southern tip of Patagonia all the way up back to England, basically walking. And he won't go back home until he does it by foot. And he crossed the Darien Gap on foot.
Wow.
And like when they're during the Civil War in Colombia, and
Wow.
was the first guy to cross the Bering Strait on foot. He set a Guinness record, and now I think he's cycling or he's swimming across the Caspian Sea. So he's on that leg of his journey now. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, we just get a lot of and some people that I've connected with have been on the podcast as well. Like one of my friends that I met in Ethiopia on my first day cycling was a guy named Tetsuya from Japan, and he was just trying to get the hell out of Ethiopia. Basically, he had already been there for a few weeks, and I met him on my first day, and he was just he just thought it was so funny that I wanted to focus on Ethiopia while he was trying to get out and get to Sudan as soon as he could.
Yeah.
So he was on the podcast too, and that was fun just to rehatch some of the stories with him, and yeah, just people I've met on the road too have been guests, and yeah, it's great to catch up make new connections. And some of your guests on the podcast too have also been on the Intrepid Global Citizen podcast, like Sana and Benjamin
Oh, yeah.
From Sweden that are going for human rights for Western Sahara. They stayed at my apartment a few weeks ago. They were in Seoul, actually. So that was great just to connect on the podcast and then be able to host people, meet them in person too.
I love it. George, your sweet spot is definitely sharing stories, right? The storytelling piece of it. It's like one of your zones of genius. And you're doing great work. And I really appreciate the effort and time as a podcaster, I know, that goes into creating the shows and sharing stories. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Sure. Thanks to you too for doing all this service here for Warm Showers. I know a lot of people really appreciate it. So
yes, thank you. We it's a labor of love, right? We do it because we love it and we're invested, and it's especially this show. It's one of my most favorite things with Warm Showers as part of my duties, because yes, I do a lot of administration, right? I do a lot of back end work, but this part is fun because I get to connect with people all over the world and share their experiences, not just with me, but with everyone else. So I always enjoy it.
Yeah. Thanks for your service and all that work.
Yes. And I'm going to put the link to the Intrepid Global Citizen podcast, both if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be below. And if you're just listening to this, check out the show notes. We'll put all the links on how you can find George on his social media and both his book and his podcast, and you can connect with him further. So thank you so much, George.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
And for those of you listening, you know that sharing is caring. So if you love this show, please feel free to share it with somebody that you think would enjoy listening or watching or learning more about bike touring or, of course, hosting. You do not have to be a cycle tourist in order to open your doors and experience the world through others' experiences as they're on their journey. I know for me as a host, it's one of the most amazing things to have visitors from all over come through and share their perspective, their journey. It's so delightful. So you are welcome to be a host, even if you haven't cycle toured before. So thank you for listening. And thanks again, George.
Thanks. Yeah.
And we will be back again soon.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed the show as much as we enjoyed making it. Wherever you are listening, please leave us a rating and a review, as it helps us reach more cyclists and hosts around the world. Visit us at Warmshowers.org to become a part of our community, or on Instagram at Warmshowers_org. If you would like to be a guest on the show or submit a question, please make sure to email us at podcast@warmshowers.org.